Anybody?
I've got a question about some advice that someone told a student of mine once, which was, don't revise it too much, just send it off to the press, they'll tell you what to do. And I've sort of modified that with my students to say, take out the dissertationese, take out the obvious dissertation part, but don't make too huge of a revision until the editor gives you some feedback. How would you modify that to best suit really the way you would like to see it done?
I would say that takes a certain level of confidence in the work. Because
you're relying a lot on the review process.
Yeah, you're relying a lot on the editor and on the review process, and you may be opening yourself up for a peer reviewer to be very harsh.
I've seen that a lot, where the peer reviewers often are really, to put it mildly, rubbed the wrong way, because when they get this not very revised manuscript, they immediately jump to, this person was too lazy to really put any work into it. And I'm irritated that I'm having to point out all these very obvious things that, should already be gotten out of the dissertation. Not everyone will react that way, but I'm surprised. Large majority, especially of senior reviewers, often will just go to an angrier mode. Sometimes what I've suggested is, for reasons of time, or if a full revision, that the author would like to do is not entirely possible, they've done some, but can they include a several-page revision plan saying, I haven't done this yet, but I know these are the 6 things, that I really want to do to further transform this book, and this is what I'm planning. That, yeah, I think would at least disarm the peer reviewer and say, okay, the person has, has a plan, has put some thought into this. I may have different ideas for them, but at least it shows some engagement with the revision.
Plus, don't discount the usefulness of the proposal itself, because we ask for 1 or 2 sample chapters. And if, in this case, if someone wants feedback and they don't really know what revisions might be necessary, then maybe preparing 2 sample chapters to the best they can possibly be is the best sort of in-between option, because we can send that proposal out to readers. You all may have both read reader proposals for us in the past. And that's a good way of getting some early feedback without having done all of the revisions and then being told, well, you did the wrong revisions. There is,
right.
Yeah, the author is caught sometimes between, well, I did all of this because I thought I needed to, and now I'm being told by this reader to go back to point B or point A, and I'm much farther along in the alphabet. So the proposal is maybe a good way to avoid some of that danger.
And further, that advice risks something that they haven't mentioned yet as editors, but they are judicious about the moment when we decide to burden a peer reviewer with our query. We have a stable of experts who are our peer reviewers who work in the field, and it does cost us a small sum of money to do that. And if the manuscript that comes, or if the proposal that comes has no polish whatsoever and can't make the translation so that it can be presented within that acquisitions committee, it runs the risk of having someone say, well, it is not worth our seeking a peer review on this because we can't conceive who this book is for. And that shuts everything down that you've been trying to do.
And then there's also the practical matter of human nature. Every editor, I'm in no exception here, every editor's got a stack of things. I've got 10 manuscripts and 30 proposals on my office right now that I need to read. If you give me an unrevised dissertation, even if it's a great topic, you're at the bottom of that stack. And because I don't have the time to read an unrevised dissertation. Now, this is human nature.
I have a little advice. I know many of you are in a time crunch, that you need to get a volume out by tenure consideration time. On the other hand, the transformation process from dissertation to book requires a psychological reorientation. One thing you can do is have some sort of extreme experience that gives you a chance for a new start. Go to Ponce de Leon Springs in Defuniak, Florida. Soak your head for a couple days. Get really cold or something. Go to Istanbul for a week. I did it this summer and it helped me. Do something to change your orientation, and then if you're like starting from the beginning and trying to write, it's not just a matter of getting rid of a literature review. You're addressing an audience. It's partly in more oral terms. Imagine you're speaking out loud to a troop of very alert Eagle Scouts and trying to explain your topic to them. Or I used to use my dad, who had about 20% of an inclination to be intellectual. But he was a very smart guy and he liked me. So I would reword. I would have something that was too scholarly on the left, and then I'd be typing a different version of it where that different audience was right in front of me.
Yeah.
And I soaked my head every 3 days. You have to find a way to go from the obsessive to the complete, and from the absolutely accountable to the best communication to a fair number of people. And that's not easy, and you just have a couple years to do it.
Yeah.
Another bit of advice is to work on it a little bit each day, if you can. Put it in front of that extra trip out to eat. There are all kinds of things you can casually sacrifice. A little bit better car. Take a little bit of time each day and transform yourself.
Meditation, maybe.
Yes.
When is a good time to approach a publisher or to send I have a couple of chapters and I haven't even written a prospectus yet. They're really from my master's work. But I think it's kind of at a decent point because it's not too dissertation-esque. It's got a lot of practical things in it that would maybe appeal to a greater audience. So when do you, not being really at the dissertation level yet.
Well, we talk to people at every stage, and we are the University Press of Mississippi, so part of what we do is also provide a service to the people on our 8 campuses. Now, realistically, if you say to somebody cold, I've got a really good master's, they're going to say, good for you.
Right.
You're not going to get a great reaction. If you put together a proposal using a couple of chapters out of the master's, if you feel that those chapters are good chapters, then, and don't even frame it in terms of dissertation, but frame it in terms of, for the book that I want to write, here's my proposal, here's my plan, here's what I'm trying to do, and here are 2 sample chapters, then that package is going to be considered. But now, it's a tricky thing. And if you go to an academic meeting, it's always good just to chat people up, because some editors are going to say, they're going to not necessarily give you the time of day if you're too early in the process. And others are happy to discuss a project because they want to establish that connection, maybe not for now, but for 5 years from now. So I don't have a hard answer for you, but if you've got something that you think is worth someone else looking at, and that comes back to the question of reviewers and Dave's point earlier, you need to think about whatever you send or submit to anybody, are you willing to be judged on that? And if you're early in the process, but you've got material that you think is good enough that you are willing to be judged by it, not just by an editor, but by some outside professor somewhere, then there's no harm in it. No one's going to give you demerits for doing that.
It could be a good time for conference papers and
Yeah.
articles, because, like, for example, an article in a journal that's big in your field, there's peer review in that as well, and you'll get more responses. More people will know your work. Like I said, you get more input, and that might open things up for your for your master's degree thesis and your dissertation and all that. And, you know, there are some editors, depending on the topic, that may be trying to sort of incubate, you know, scholars' research, because, like, I know an editor who's building a list in film studies, you know, at Iowa, and, you know, that's a very particular thing, but it's very interesting, you know, fandom and, you know, all the stuff that's happening with responses to films and television, Buffy the Vampire Slayer or whatever. And, you know, that editor, I can't speak for her, but that editor may want to keep in touch with you over the years because, you know, this is something that she's sort of, you know, bringing to her list, and that's not that easy to find right now.
There are two pathways of targeting that are going on here, and one of them emanates from you, the creator, towards someone like Craig or Vijay or Leila. And if you can, I think, as you're working your way through what you're writing, if you can identify someone like Vijay who's been acquiring and finding a way to publish really interesting books that blend Black studies with Asian studies and popular culture, if that's your thing, he may be exactly your target. And as Vijay said, when you give a conference paper, you may end up with an email from Vijay before that conference paper happens that shows you, hey, this guy's real interested in this stuff to approach me right now at this point. But always remember, this is a writer. Targeting and submitting is not the same as writing. You'll get a whole lot more done if you target and submit about a third of the time and write 2/3 of the time to make the end product the best piece of content that you can.
And I think we've run out of time for our group session, is that right? 1 o'clock.